Yo, what's going on guys, Camilo here. In this video we're going to be reviewing the 5 new Battle Pass weapons. There are 5 new Battle Pass weapons that are going to be released in 4.0. A sword, claymore, polearm, bow, and catalyst. We're going to review all of them. I'm going to explain their passives, how they work, and then I'm going to tell you guys which characters can use them. And then finally, should you get them or not? So yeah, we're going to do that for each one of the 5 weapons. So without further ado, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's begin. Alright, so first of all, starting off with the sword. It's called the Wolf-Fang. So it's going to have like an average base attack for a 4-star sword. And then it's going to have crit rate as a passive. It's going to have 27.5% at level 90, which is pretty decent. An average base attack and then a good crit rate passive, which is pretty good, especially because it's crit rate that's going to be needed for a lot of characters. Now, moving on to the passive, first of all, damage dealt by elemental skill and elemental burst is increased by 16%. There are no conditions on that. It's just like a default bonus. So when you equip this weapon, you're going to have your elemental skill and burst damage increased by 16%, which is pretty good. And then for the rest of the passive, when an elemental skill hits an opponent, its crit rate is going to be increased by 2%. And then also when a burst hits an opponent, its crit rate is going to be increased by 2%. So what does that mean is that when you hit an opponent with your elemental skill's crit rate is going to be increased by 2%. Not all of your crit rate, only your elemental skill's crit rate. And same thing for your elemental burst. When you hit an opponent with your elemental burst crit rate is going to be increased by 2%. Only the elemental burst crit rate. These effects are going to last for 10 seconds and have 4 max stacks. And you have a triggering cooldown of 0.1 seconds. So as I explained before, the crit rate increase is only going to be to this specific thing, either your elemental burst or elemental skill, for a maximum of 4 stacks also. So what can this weapon offer you like fully is 16% elemental skill and burst damage as a whole, and then 8% crit rate bonus to your elemental skill and 8% crit rate bonus to your elemental burst. That's the full maximum potential of this weapon, and obviously the crit rate from the substat. Now for the characters that this weapon could work on, first of all, I would say the main things on this weapon, which is the elemental skill and burst damage, is increased by 16%. That's going to be a default, so you're not really going to need anything to like trigger it. So any character who focuses on their elemental burst or skill can usually benefit from this weapon enough, I would say. You know, you have a good base attack, you have crit rate as a substat, and then you're also going to have your elemental skill or burst damage increase. So that's already pretty good. The rest of the passive is going to be cool, but it's not even really that much. It's, as I said, 8% elemental burst or elemental skill damage increase or elemental skill crit rate increase. And that's not really like a lot. But if you want to take full advantage out of this weapon, usually you just want a character who uses their elemental burst or skill like repeatedly. So they can trigger the passive and then take advantage out of it on the rest of the hits. So that's like a character who can use this weapon fully. They need to be dealing damage out of their elemental skills and bursts, and they also need to be doing that repeatedly. So they need to be doing like multiple hits with their elemental skill or burst in a short period of time. So yeah, with that being said, let's go to characters and then we'll see on who this weapon is going to be good or not. So we have Ayaka. This weapon can also work on Ayaka for her elemental burst, but the thing is the crit rate substat is not really going to be as useful because Ayaka doesn't really need crit rate, so I wouldn't really say it's going to be a super good weapon. It's not really going to work on Jean. Traveler, it can work on the Hydro Traveler. It's going to be pretty good on him. Kea, it can work on Kea too, on like a Melt Kea, because you're going to be using his elemental burst and it's going to be hitting multiple enemies at times. Also, you're going to need crit rate on a Melt Kea. It's going to be pretty good. For like a Freeze Kea, it's not really going to be as good. Again, same reason as Ayaka, because the crit rate substat is going to be useless. But on a Melt Kea, it's going to be pretty good. It can work on Xingqiu. I'm not really sure if you really want to use it on Xingqiu, because you have just better options like the Sac Sword and stuff like that. But indeed, it can work with his elemental burst. Bennett, no. Chi-Chi, no. Albedo, it can work with his elemental skill. Again, I'm not sure if it's better than other weapons, but it definitely can work. Keqing, maybe I would say for her elemental burst, but again, I don't think it's going to be better than her current options right now. Kazuha, no. Kiara, no. Kuki, Ayato, probably not too. Nilo, no. Layla, no. Alhaitham, it's probably going to be pretty good on Alhaitham actually. I would say it's probably going to be one of his best weapons. Free to play, of course, or it's technically not free to play, but you know, as a good like 4-star weapon. But yeah, it's going to buff his elemental skills damage, and this is most of the damage he deals. It's going to give you a lot more like damage bonus and extra crit rate to your elemental skill, which is pretty good. So yeah, I'd say it's gonna be very good on Alhaitham. And then finally you have Lynette. It's gonna be pretty good on her too, I would say. I did a weapons tier list guide for Lynette if you want to check it out. But yeah, it's gonna be usable on Lynette too. So final thoughts, should you get this weapon or not? I mean, I would say it's a decent weapon on most characters, but the only point where I would recommend it is if you're getting it for like Alhaitham. In that case, I would say yeah, if you don't have any other like better weapons. Other than that, I would say each character can probably do good without this weapon. I mean, it can be an improvement for some if you don't have like good weapons for them, but generally speaking, usually you have better like free-to-play alternatives, so it's not really that important. So the general rating for this weapon, I would say it's decent. It's nothing special, but it's good. Alright, now for the claymore, we have the talking stick. So you're gonna have a high base attack and then a small crit rate substat, which is usual for a 4-star weapon. I'd even say those are like good base stats, especially because the substat is crit rate, so it makes up for it for being low. And also you're gonna have the high base attack, so I'd say overall it's the base stats are good. Now for the passive though, we're gonna have attack will be increased by 16% for 15 seconds after being affected by pyro, and then the effect has a cooldown of 12 seconds. And then pretty much the same thing, the elemental damage bonus will be increased by 12% for 15 seconds after being affected by hydro, cryo, electro, or dendro. And it also has a cooldown of 12 seconds. So in order to gain the bonus from this weapon, you're gonna have to be affected by pyro or like hydro or cryo and stuff like that. Not affects enemies, but you're the one that needs to be affected. So obviously the only ways that you can get affected by, you know, an element in Genshin Impact is that if an enemy hits you with that element, or if you have a character on your team who can apply this element consistently on you. Well, obviously being hit by enemies is not good, and also it's very inconsistent because you don't know which enemies you're going to be facing. So the only way to ensure this weapon can be working is that to have team members who can affect you by these things. Pyro and then another element. So yeah, it's a very hard passive to activate, I would say. It's definitely not comfortable. You're gonna have very restricted characters who can play this, and even for these characters, they're gonna have like very restricted team options. So yeah, that being said, let's go to characters, and then we're gonna see which characters can use this. So without even scrolling too much through every single character, I would say there are only probably like 2 characters who can use this properly. The first one is Diluc, the second one is Beidou. So with Diluc, you can probably play him with like Bennett or something like that, and you're gonna get the attack bonus. And with Beidou, it's pretty much the same thing. You can play her with like Barbara or Bennett too, and it can work. Even the characters who can even like apply these statuses, I'm not even sure how many we have, but the only ones I can think of are like Bennett, Barbara, who can apply hydro consistently, and then I guess Dory for electro. Xingqiu can also do it, but I'm not sure if it's gonna work. So yeah, that's about it, honestly. I don't think any other characters are good. I mean, if they are, there probably are some that I forgot, but the point is the teams are gonna be very restricted for this weapon to work. I'm not even gonna bother with the rest of the characters. It ain't gonna work. I looked at them before. None of them are really gonna be able to use it properly. Well, I guess maybe also Xinyan, but it's also not gonna work properly. So yeah, the only characters I can see using this weapon like fully properly are Diluc and Beidou, and also on restricted teams. So yeah, that's about it. Is this weapon good? I would say no. I'll just straight up say it's a bad weapon. I mean, it can probably be used as like a stat stick for the high base attack and the crit rate, but I doubt it's gonna be like best in slot or even like a free-to-play best in slot for any character. Probably every single character of those is gonna have just like a better weapon. So yeah, I don't really see any point in getting this claymore. I would say it's one of the worst weapons in this battle pass. So yeah, token stick, it's bad. Now, we're moving on to the polearm. We have Ballad of the Fjords, an average base stack for a polearm, and then you have crit rate as a substat too. So, I mean, I guess decent base stats, a normal base stack, and then crit rate. You can't say no to this. This is always pretty good. But now for the passive, when there are at least 3 different elemental types in your party, your elemental mastery is going to be increased by 120. Pretty simple passive. Just have 3 characters on your team, different elements. Your elemental mastery is going to be increased by 120. Obviously, obviously that's the elemental mastery of the wielder of this weapon. So yeah, there's not really much to explain here. Let's move on to characters and see which ones can use this weapon. Alright, so we have Sean Link. Yep, she can use this weapon. Shock, I know, another good weapon for Sean Link. But yeah, she definitely can use it just for the elemental mastery and the crit rate. I mean, it's pretty basic, especially on like a national team or something like that. It's gonna be pretty good. We have Zhao, no. Zhongli, no. Rosaria, she can probably use this weapon on like a reverse melt team. You're gonna have the crit rate and then elemental mastery, which is pretty good. Hu Tao, she can probably use it too. Also, it's just pretty simple. You have the crit rate, elemental mastery, which is pretty good. Now, I'm not sure if it's gonna be better than something like the deathmatch or, you know, something like that. But if you don't have them, then it's definitely gonna be a very usable weapon on Hu Tao. Well, also, it depends on the team. So you gotta make sure there are like 3 different elements. Other than that, it's not gonna work, obviously. But yeah, you know this. Obviously, if you play this weapon, make sure you have 3 different elements on your team. Because if you're running like a triple pyro team or something like that, this weapon might not work. But yeah, just make sure you have 3 different elements and you're good. Thoma, I don't know if it's gonna work. I guess on like a version team or something like that where you have another like Dendro enabler. Other than that, I'm not really sure. I don't think it's gonna be that good of a weapon on Thoma, to be honest, but it can work in some scenarios. Raiden Shogun, generally not the weapon, but on like a Hyper Bloom Raiden, I would say it can work. Shinha, no. Yunji, no. Sinu, it's pretty much the same thing with Raiden Shogun. I think it could work in like a Hyper Bloom team where you just need elemental mastery. Candace, no. Yao Yao and Mika, also no. So yeah, is this weapon good? I mean, it can't be bad, to be honest. You know, you're gonna have a decent base attack, then crit rate, and then also elemental mastery. Pretty basic things, and it doesn't really require much to even get them. Yes, you only need to have like 3 different elements on your team, but generally speaking, this can be easily achieved. So it's a pretty basic weapon, I would say. For a lot of these characters, even I would say it can maybe be like outclassed by other options, like the Dragon's Bane or the Deathmatch or Hu Tao or something like that. But generally speaking, it's not a bad weapon. So yeah, it's not really like game breaking or anything like that, but I would say it's a decent weapon. So if you don't have like any other good weapons for a specific character, you can get this weapon and it's gonna be pretty good. So yeah, the polearm, I would say just decent. Now for the bow, we have the Scion of the Blazing Sun. Pretty high base attack and then crit rate also as a substat. Pretty much the same thing as the claymore. Again, good stats. You always need this. Always appreciated. So yeah. Now moving on to the important part, which is the passive. So for the passive, they always make it more complicated than it should be. I don't know what is the Heart Seer and Arrow. And basically what's going on here is that you're gonna charge attack an opponent. Your charge attack is gonna create another arrow that's gonna deal damage to an enemy, and then also make your upcoming charge attacks hit this enemy like harder by 28%. This specific enemy only. That's gonna last for 10 seconds, and you can only do this for 10 seconds. So you hit an enemy with your charge attack, your next charge attacks are gonna be stronger. That's it. That's pretty much the whole passive. You can say it's just say charge attacks buffer. The only problem with this is that it's gonna do this to only one specific enemy, so it's gonna be pretty good against like single target enemies, but against multiple target enemies, you're only gonna be doing that for like once every 10 seconds. So it's definitely not gonna be as good. I would say it's even useless against like multiple target enemies, but against like tanky one target enemies, it's gonna be pretty good. So yeah, it's a pretty simple passive, just pretty much buffs your charge attacks against one enemy every 10 seconds. That's it. Now for the characters who can use this weapon, I guess it's also pretty simple. Just a character who uses their charge attacks can use this weapon. Obviously they're gonna need the crit rate substat. That's gonna be appreciated too. So out of all of these characters, I'd say Line is going to be using this weapon pretty well too. Again, I did a Line weapons guide if you want to check it out. It's going to be a decent weapon on her, pretty good, just buffs her charge attacks, which is pretty good. It's going to be a pretty good weapon on Alternati too. Also buffs his charge attacks, pretty good. Obviously, it can also work on Ganyu. Again, depending on the team, but generally speaking, it can work too. Now, I'm not sure if it's going to be better than like other free-to-play options, but again, it can work. And then finally, you have Child. It can work on him definitely too. Because when you charge attack inside of his elemental skill, your hit is going to be considered a charge attack and it's going to be buffed, which is pretty good. So yeah, you have Line, Ternari, Ganyu, and Child, I would say. Those are the characters that can use this bow. So for the bow, should you get or no? Is it a good bow? For the characters I listed, I mean, it's a decent bow, but for most of them, it's also not gonna be like the best option unless you don't have any other weapons. So I would say it's a less than average bow generally in terms of like value, but you can always get it again if you don't have any other weapons, just for the crit rate and the high base attack, and you can use it on pretty much any like DPS character bow. So yeah, I would say it's a decent weapon. Again, if you don't have any other weapons specifically for the 4 characters I listed, then yes, you might get it. If you already do, it's a skip. Again, it's nothing like game breaking or anything like that. It's just another decent bow. And now finally moving on to the catalyst, the Sacrificial Jade. So you're gonna have a low base attack and then a huge crit rate substat. Again, low base attack, but it makes up for it for the huge crit rate substats. I would say those are good base stats too. Now for the passive is that when you're not on the field for 5 seconds, your max HP is gonna be increased and then your elemental mastery is gonna be increased. If you are on the field for 10 seconds, you're gonna lose the effects and you're gonna take another 5 seconds to regain them again. That's pretty much the passive. Just play off field, you get HP and you get elemental mastery. The thing is, that's not bad, but when you look at what this weapon gives you, like generally speaking, it's gonna give you crit rate, HP, and elemental mastery, which is kind of a weird combination. So I would say you're gonna kind of struggle to find any characters who can use this properly. And with that, yeah, just let's move on to characters and then we'll see. So for all of these catalyst users, I'm just gonna go straight to the points. Except for like maybe Beiju, none of them can actually use this weapon like fully properly. If they use crit rate, they don't need HP. If they need HP, they don't use crit rate. If they use all of them, they're not going to be on field. Every single character is going to have a problem with this weapon, except for maybe like DPS Kokami, I guess, or something like that. But generally speaking, the only one who can actually see using this weapon properly is going to be Beiju. Other than that, it's pretty much a useless weapon. Now, obviously, it can still be used for like a single thing out of those, like only for the HP or only for the crit rate or something like that. But it's not going to be like good on a single character. It's going to be usable on a lot of characters, but it's generally going to be less than average on most of them. So yeah, for this catalyst, I don't really see the point of it, at least for the characters we have right now. So for right now, I would say it's a bad catalyst. So yeah, which of these weapons I would prefer? I mean, I like the sword and the polearm more. I think those are probably the best weapons on the whole battle pass for right now. Should you get them? I mean, I don't know, to be honest. I think it heavily depends on like which weapons you already have and what you need, like which characters are trying to build. So you're just gonna have to look and see. But generally speaking, I think the weapons that have the most value are gonna be the sword and the polearm, at least for right now. But yeah, that was the video, guys. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and see y'all in the next video. Peace.